Don't they realize that no one is listening to them anymore? They are the boy or girl or they, them who cried wolf. Don't they realize? Good morning, 6:05 on a Thursday. It's great to be here on KCMO Talk Radio 95.7 FM. As always, we're streaming on the KCMO Talk Radio app. So we've got less than 2 weeks to go until this crazy election wraps up. And desperation is seeping into the Kamala Harris campaign. We've seen it on full display this week. But things really went to the next level yesterday when Kamala Harris did not a press conference, but a little speech from the VP residence where what did they do? Call Donald Trump Hitler. Wow, never heard that one before.
Talk about a bombshell.
It's only been 10 years of basically calling Trump Hitler. But now you're hearing it in a much more intense, much more direct way from the Democratic nominee yesterday.
He said he wanted generals like Adolf Hitler had. Donald Trump said that because he does not want a military that is loyal to the United States Constitution. He wants a military that is loyal to him. He wants a military who will be loyal to him personally. One that will obey his orders even when he tells them to break the law or abandon their oath to the Constitution of the United States. In just the past week, Donald Trump has repeatedly called his fellow Americans the enemy from within, and even said that he would use the United States military to go after American citizens.
So this is Kamala Harris referencing the story in The Atlantic, and The Atlantic has been wrong before. In fact, they've been more wrong than they've been right when it comes to anonymously sourced stories about Donald Trump. That's the story that she's referencing that we discussed a bit yesterday. Well, first off, I look at Kamala Harris making these statements, and I say to myself, I don't know who said what, but frankly, I don't care. I don't care. Democrats have been calling Republicans Nazis and Hitler since before I was born, since Ronald Reagan was in office, for all of my adult life, since I've been voting in presidential elections, which the first time I did it was 2008 for John McCain. They called him Hitler. Now they love John McCain. It's funny how that works, I will add. But they've been doing it for my adult life, never mind many of yours. So you have, by the way, people who are close to the story that they put out from John Kelly, who have denied that ever happened, multiple reporters who were in the room when those comments are alleged to have taken place, who said that did not happen. John Roberts, notable anchor, honest newsman over at Fox, was like, I was there for that. I would have remembered that. And that is not at all what happened. So the story itself is in serious question because you can't take these people seriously. Because they've been calling Donald Trump these very same names for a decade. And here's the thing, too. We lived through a Donald Trump presidency, and all the awful things they claimed were going to happen didn't happen. Was he silly with a cell phone? Did he get distracted by little things? Absolutely. Were there times when Donald Trump spent more of his efforts on ridiculous media battles than like things that impact the country? No doubt about it. I won't deny that for a second. Trump would get very easily distracted during his first 4 years in office. That was one of his major issues. But it was still a highly successful single term for the bulk of the American people. When you look at economically, when you look at peace and prosperity around the world, especially compared to now, and that's what most people are looking at. So Kamala Harris does this whole spiel yesterday where she calls Donald Trump, basically Hitler 2.0. And I think back to 2 nights ago when Barack Obama was campaigning for Kamala Harris. And Barack Obama had the audacity to say something like this.
I don't understand how we got so toxic and just so divided and so bitter. And I get why sometimes people just don't want to pay attention to it. And we all have friends like that. We have family members who just like, it's all It's all a circus out there. I get that.
The day after that, literally hours after Barack Obama makes that statement, the candidate that he is stumping for gives a speech on how Donald Trump is Hitler. Boy, I don't know, old Barack. I don't know how things got so toxic. As I said when we talked about that clip yesterday, if we discuss Barack Obama's legacy correctly, it will be through the prism of Barack Obama brought us Donald Trump. Barack Obama and Joe Biden's treatment of John McCain and then Mitt Romney, when they treated Mitt freaking Romney like he was Hitler 2.0. That's when Republicans in many cases said enough's enough. And then Trump comes along and the rest is history. Their legacy is Donald Trump. Their legacy is the political discourse that we have in this country today. Because of stuff like that and things that Kamala Harris has been saying here that have become far more extreme over the last couple of days, as it appears like the campaign is on thin ice. And the campaign is sinking and sinking fast. Now, I don't say that, and I don't say that with any kind of inside information around how the election's going to break. But if you look at these two campaigns right now with 12 days to go, put the politics aside, which one would you rather be? Where do you think the momentum is right now between these two campaigns? Kamala Harris is doing town halls last night with CNN. She's not doing that because she thinks she's up by 10 points. I promise you. That's not the point of Kamala Harris going on CNN and giving you word salad after word salad after word salad of an answer on that stage last night. No, it's because there's a sense that they need to make up some ground. And I believe they do. That's just me looking at some polling, the same polling that you're looking at. Wall Street Journal had some more favorable polling for Donald Trump yesterday with 12 days to go. Early voting would suggest Republicans are turning out at a much higher rate than they did back in 2020. So all those things, all those trends, Wall Street Journal, their poll, national survey, has Donald Trump up by 2 points on Kamala Harris, 47-45. That's in a national poll. That is stunning. Republicans don't win the popular vote. This poll's got Donald Trump in the lead. Now, polling is what you make of it. You take it with a grain of salt. Nobody should be resting on their laurels right now. But, man, for all the talk about we've got to get the wannabe Hitler away from the White House, it is awfully rich as well for people who have been highly authoritarian when they have gained power. Let's also not forget that part of this as well. The same people that say Donald Trump is Hitler threw a grandmother in prison for praying at an abortion clinic. Can we not forget little things and stories like that? As we get the show rolling on a Thursday on KCMO Talk Radio, 95.7 FM. Now, how did that town hall go last night? Well, it didn't go well. And that's not me just saying that from a partisan perspective. There was one clip in particular that stood out to me, and it had nothing to do with policy. It was an opportunity for Kamala Harris to relate to you, to relate to me, to relate to normal people. It was not a policy question. And that's the question that, to me, defined the entire evening. I'll play it for you next on KCMO Talk Radio, 95.7 FM. So last night, Kamala Harris does a town hall with Anderson Cooper on CNN. And the point of this is not because the campaign thinks it's up by 10 points. No, that's not the case at all. The campaign is in a place, I believe, where it feels it's behind, it's too close to call, so now they have to put their candidate out to do some media. If they could do it all over again, they would have had Kamala Harris doing media from the get-go. But they thought they could pull off a win without doing any media, right? That's why they did no media for the first 5 weeks of the campaign. The first thing she did of any substance was a sit-down with 60 Minutes or CBS at the end of August. I remember it. We were doing our Back the Blue tour up north, and that's when the interview happened the day before. And that was late August. She was the nominee in July 20th, give or take. So it was a good 5 weeks. In hindsight, they would have had her get all the flubs out in the summertime when people aren't really paying attention. But they thought they could pull off a win in this election without really having her do any media. And now here they are down the home stretch, pushing her onto various media platforms, being like, we have to do this. We have no choice. And now she's learning on the job, and it's not going well.
Well, they were counting on the media doing her media, right?
They were. There's no doubt about it. So when you don't do this a lot, and you don't either do what I do, or you don't put yourself in interview settings a lot, it's not easy. I mean, I interview plenty of people here locally in the political world, and frankly, they're just not that good at it. And it's not always their fault. It's like they just don't do it a lot. And I know it sounds easy, but the goal is to make it sound easy. While I'm not saying we're digging ditches here, but it's not supposed to be as easy as it sounds if somebody's good at the job. That's just case in point. And what you heard from Kamala Harris last night was somebody who was just not prepared for these kinds of questions. She's certainly not prepared for the policy questions. We've played those word salads over and over and over again. But there's one that really stood out to me. And the thing that stood out to me is when Kamala Harris was asked a very simple question by Anderson Cooper.
Is there something you can point to in your life, political life or in your life in the last 4 years, that you think is a mistake that you have learned from?
I mean, I've made many mistakes. And they range from, if you've ever parented a child, you make lots of mistakes too. In my role as vice president, I mean, I've probably worked very hard at making sure that I am well versed on issues, and I think that is very important. It's a mistake not to be well versed on an issue and feel compelled to answer a question.
Oh, man. I'm going to read that just so you make sure you heard that correctly. I mean, if you've ever parented a child, you make lots of mistakes to, should I throw in the cackle there, or is it too early for that?
Yuck. We could fill in. We could do Curly from the Three Stooges or Woody the Woodpecker or anything.
In my role as vice president, I mean, I probably worked very hard at making sure that I am well-versed on issues. That's not a mistake. There's nothing more admirable, there's nothing more attractive in a relationship, on the job, than someone saying, yeah, I screwed up. Yeah, I messed that one up. My bad. In sports, right? Same thing. Don't you like that from your athletes? Don't you like that from your significant other? When they just say, yeah, I got that one wrong. My bad. Now let's all move on. Admitting you made a mistake means you're a human being, makes you relatable. That's what it's about.
Awareness.
Yes, having a little bit of self-awareness. And to answer a question like that, with that kind of an answer, and not give any kind of substance to it, fine. The parent thing is a road we can all go down. Heck, I screwed up last night as a dad. I reprimanded the older two. I probably should have only reprimanded one of the two. I did them together, and that was a mistake in hindsight. I feel bad about it. I screwed up. Professionally, trust me, we can all think of great examples where we screw up professionally, and Kamala Harris should be able to do that easily in a relatable fashion, and she just simply can't. I'll never forget when I was told by the best sports radio program director in the country. The guy's name is Mark Chernoff. He's since retired. He ran WFAN, the biggest sports radio brand in America, for 3 decades. Told me I did the worst show in the history of his radio station. I will never forget it. Pulls me off the air after the show, and he told me it was the worst show in the history of the radio station. That's a lot of shows over 30 years, by the way. And I thought my career was over at that point. It turned out to be a great lesson for me, but it's something I'll never forget. We all have those moments. And with all due respect to Kamala Harris, there have been plenty of mistakes. If I want to give her the benefit of the doubt, maybe she couldn't think of which mistake she wanted to cite. Maybe that's what went wrong for her there. I don't know. But you've got to be able. The problem for Kamala Harris and the entire campaign, they keep trying to make it about Trump. Trump is a known commodity. Every poll shows Donald Trump at a solid 46, 47%. He hasn't budged. It's like mud. Whatever you throw at him, nothing sticks. But they are making the same mistakes as Hillary Clinton back in 2016. They somehow think that they're going to get something to stick, no matter how credible or non-credible it is, and that's going to be the thing. And it's just simply not going to work. And what she needs to do is endear people to herself down the home stretch, and she is incapable of doing it because, frankly, she's not an endearing person, John.
How many times do you get to answer a question?
Yeah.
It's been posed on what, Colbert?
How many?
This one, CBS? Anyway, it's like she could have said, hey, I burnt the apple pies at McDonald's one time.
Whatever.
Make something up and tie it together.
To make it sound funny, make it sound good. Instead, you get that. Victor's in Parkville. Hey, Victor, you're on KCMO. Good morning.
Good morning, Pete. You know, the thing is, the reason Kamala can't think of a mistake she's made is because she hasn't done anything. But initially I called because you were talking about the whole Nazi thing with Trump and everything else. And, you know, the military, I mean, anybody who thinks the military is going to follow a president, any president, you know, over their oath, they don't understand that the oath that the military takes, whether it's officer or enlisted. We take an oath to the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Where you have problems is people like, you know, General Milley or FBI Comey or CIA Brennan, who put their ideology above the Constitution and above the nation. They think they're above it all. Trump understands and abides by his oath. That's why he can, you know, figure out who he wants to go ahead and put forth for the Supreme Court. Constitutionalists, people who understand what's going on. And, you know, Obama, that guy, race relations were improving before he was elected president. And after 8 years, racism and hate crimes are more apt today than they were ever before. They were on the decline before he was president. So this guy's really got no place to speak.
Thank you, Victor. And that is true. Look at the Gallup poll. Race relations were steady within white adults and black adults from about 2000 to about 2012. And then they started falling off a cliff. It was that nasty re-election campaign for Biden and Obama in 2012 that started things trending in the wrong direction, plus the Ferguson effect as well, shortly thereafter. Mark's doing his Trump dance in there with the arms going back and forth, aren't you, Mark? I see you. I see you. One. All right, you're rocking, you're rolling. 7:05 on a Thursday on KCMO. Quentin Lucas at 7:35. Harris Faulkner of Fox News will be here at 8:05 on KCMO Talk Radio. So we had a U.S. Senate candidate in Missouri shoot a reporter the other day. I'm laughing because it's hysterical. Thank goodness the reporter's okay from Woke 41 Action News. But what's even funnier is how this thing has been covered by media. So Lucas Kuntz is the Democrat running against Josh Hawley. And I guess it is safe to say that this U.S. Senate race in Missouri went from likely R to very safe or very unsafe D. Is that a fair way to put it? When you look at the state of the race after Lucas Kuntz accidentally ends up shooting a reporter. So he's doing a little campaign stunt up there in Holt, Missouri. And what ends up happening is he's there with Adam Kinzinger, of all people, as if the story can't get any more bizarre. The former congressman from Illinois who got major TDS and then started becoming a mouthpiece for the other side of the political aisle. So he's up there with Adam Kinzinger, and they're firing an AR-15, and something happened. A bullet fragment ricocheted off a target, and it hit the reporter. Now, I'm not sitting here as Rambo, okay? You're not going to take me on the hunting trip and expect me to be the guy that's hitting all the targets or taking care of you for the trip. That's not me. I'll readily admit that. But when I first saw the video 2 nights ago, I thought to myself, well, for a guy shooting a weapon with that kind of power to be what appears to be maybe 15, 20 feet away from metal targets, that just looks like a dumb idea. And that's exactly what apparently ended up happening here. Now, Lucas Kuntz, God bless him, he served the country, Marine, the whole thing. But I'm just looking at the situation and looking at this shooting display that they're putting on, and I'm like, well, that doesn't look very smart. That looks like pretty concerning when you're shooting a target from all that close. So he ends up shooting a reporter. Could you imagine if that was Josh Hawley doing a gun show in the woods in Holt, Missouri, and he ends up shooting a target and shrapnel ends up hitting a reporter?
Could have been a pine cone or an acorn, and they would have said, unclear at this time whether it was shrapnel directly from the military-style weapon.
Well, exactly. That's exactly what they would have done, John. Republicans take committing violence against the media to a whole new level. This is secretly what Josh Hawley wanted. That's what they would have alleged.
Josh is preparing to be one of Trump's generals.
He's applying for the job. They would have taken this to a whole new level had it been Josh Hawley accidentally shooting a target and then a bullet fragment ricocheting off that said target and hitting a reporter in the arm. This would have been on Morning Joe, MSNBC. Rachel Maddow would have had her crocodile tears going. Oh, my goodness, you would have never heard the end of it. Instead, how was this covered here locally? And how is it covered nationally? Well, I think the best thing I saw nationally was from Newsweek. Here's the headline from Newsweek. Reporter hit by shrapnel at shooting range, comma, Democrat gives first aid. Well, who hit him with the shrapnel, you
Arsonist
bozos?
puts out fire, right?
Yeah. Arsonist puts out fire. Notice, like, if you're going to give a Democrat the benefit of the doubt in this because you just can't help yourself if you're Newsweek, like, whatever, that's fine. Do something like U.S. Senate candidate fires gun, shrapnel hits reporter, comma, candidate gives first aid. Or candidate gives first aid to reporter that he accidentally hits with shrapnel. Just something that is somewhat intellectually honest. Instead, reporter hit by shrapnel at shooting range, Democrat gives first aid. What are you supposed to think when you see that headline? What you think is, well, wow, a reporter was hit by shrapnel. Something happened at a shooting range. And just out of nowhere, this beautiful man who happens to be a Democrat just provides first aid because, oh my goodness, he's such a good human being. Make sure you go vote for him. Man, I've seen headlines. I've seen bad headlines, and then I've seen that headline from Newsweek. That was as bad as it gets. Holy cow. And then there's the Kansas City Star, which really downplayed the entire thing. I haven't seen any editorials from them yet. I have not seen anything that they would do if it was the other way around with Josh Hawley. But what they did run is this yesterday. Democrat Lucas Kunce injured reporter while shooting. Gun safety experts had these concerns. So they go back to the well of experts. Gun safety experts have these concerns. And then there's Jason Kander, who ran for U.S. Senate Missouri a bunch of years ago. Now he does some good work with the veterans, the tiny homes here in Kansas City. But Jason Kander thinks very highly of Jason Kander in Jason Kander's mind. He's a legend in his own mind. So Jason Kander is working on behalf of or supporting Lucas Kunce. And Jason Kander responded to an ex-post by Josh Hawley. And Josh Hawley wrote, when liberals play with guns, people get hurt. And Jason Kander wrote back, dude, are you serious right now? That's a picture of a Marine, meaning Kunce, treating a gunshot wound. Politics has caused you to lose the plot entirely. Okay, no. You don't get to rewrite the narrative because now it's your preferred candidate who is using a big, scary gun and accidentally hitting reporters. You guys have spent years mocking Missouri Republicans for using guns in TV ads and, you know, Eric Greitens and all these people who the last few years have put big guns into commercials. And I admit, I think it's goofy. I can make fun of it. But, like, I don't think it's dangerous. I just think it's goofy. Like, I don't vote for the guy or gal with the biggest gun in their TV commercial. That's not how I do things. So it's easy to make fun of. But as is always is the case on the left, they have no humor with anything they do. So they treat it like, that's why people are getting shot and killed because Republicans put guns in their ads. That's what they always end up doing. And that's just simply not the case. And Jason Kander is one of those folks who makes arguments like that all the time. And now his side does it, shoots a reporter, and it's like, whoa. Suddenly the big scary gun thing is no longer an issue, huh?
He probably should have questioned Kuntz.
You'd like to think.
Doing what he said.
Exactly right. Paul in Kansas City, what's up?
Hey, Pete, I thought I'd go read the Kansas City Star yesterday at my library, and I thought that article would be above the fold since they're anti-Second Amendment. I didn't see anything on it. Secondly, that range, I retired military master sergeant. I ran ranges from in CONUS, continental U.S., to overseas 9mm to 50 cal. That's a high-velocity rifle, and that goofball crying Congressman Kinsler's got a sniper rifle shooting a sniper rifle scope on a platform of an AR-15 shooting at 10 yards. Are you kidding me?
Why is he? Well, thank you. And like I said, I'm not an expert at this. I won't pretend to be. But the guy's looking at a scope and the target's 10 yards away. I'm like, what the? What is going on here?
Yeah, it's ridiculous. And then that round, I'm looking at that range, the woods behind it. That thing can travel a quarter mile and still be deadly. This Kuntz should be relieved of duty. If he was on active duty, he'd have a general officer letter of reprimand. He'd be through. That was disgraceful. I'm just unbelievable. Marine Corps is probably like, golly, this nut job. Jeez, what an embarrassment. Thanks, Pete.
Thank you, Paul. Real quick, Randy, go ahead. You're on KCMO.
Yeah, hey, I just wanted to say they were very fortunate to have Kinzinger there because they had saline when he cried to rinse out the wound and make sure they didn't get infected. So I think they...
Kinzinger has been known to shed a tear or two when he was in Congress, right?
Yeah, no, he did. But I'll tell you what, it does mean that the Democrats need to start carrying tampons now, I guess, because they will bleed you.
I don't get it, but I that one went over my head there, Randy.
Tampons are a gunshot remedy in theory.
Oh,
so
okay.
It's a joke.
Yeah, I got you. I knew it was a joke. Sometimes it's good to stop at the first joke. That's my advice at 7:15 on a Thursday. So one of the moves this week in one of our local municipalities got a lot of attention, and it was right in Prairie Village. And you are seeing this happen in various municipalities around the region. But Prairie Village, the latest, to put some restrictions on Airbnbs and short-term rentals. The new law, the new rule is basically going to say you've got to do at least a 30-day, as I understand it, rental on any Airbnb property, and you have a year to implement that. So Lori Sharp is here on KCMO. She is a member of the Prairie Village City Council. Lori, thanks for joining us on KCMO. Always appreciate the time. What are the major things in this new piece of legislation that passed this week that will impact Prairie Village?
Well, I think you mentioned them. It is the limitation of 30 days, and we did make this not be implemented until November of 2025, which allows people, if this is what they own, it's an investment for them. It allows them to decide for the year, are they going to turn it into a long-term rental? Are they going to move into it? Are they going to sell it? So they have options, and they're not forced to do something right away.
Now, this is always a tricky spot, and it seems like it doesn't necessarily fit along certain party lines. I've made it very clear on this show, I'm a proponent to this, but there are some people who will say, hey, it's my property. You can't tell me what to do with my property. How have you handled that back and forth?
Well, the government tells us what to do with our property a lot of times. Yeah. They tell you how tall you can build your house, how much on the property you can build on your property. They tell you whether you can have chickens or pigs on your property. When you cut down a tree in Prairie Village on your property, you have to actually replace it with another tree. They tell you can't have a meth lab in your house. So the government definitely has influence on what you do to your property. And this is R1 zoning. A lot of the HOAs are against this. And so it's really, neighbors spoke out by the hundreds saying that what they want in their neighborhoods are neighbors, regular, consistent neighbors. And so This is not overstepping at all. Overstepping would be if the government takes over your property and you don't have options with it. This doesn't even come close.
Because you can still do an Airbnb if someone wants to do a 30-day stay, or you can turn it into a long-term rental, which will still be highly desirable in Prairie Village.
Correct. All of that's correct. And the 30-day minimum actually coincides with the, everybody's talking about the World Cup. Mm-hmm. Well, the World Cup lasts a whole month in July. 30 days. So a lot of people can utilize that during the World Cup and maybe have a little bit of income, and then they can still use it for longer term rentals.
How did this come to be? Was there something or a couple of things that made this such a hot button topic there that made this to a place where you guys were voting on it?
Well, actually, the previous council, made a list of issues that were the most important right then during Prairie Village. And then they prioritized that list. And the two topics they had that were on the top were teardowns and remodels and the short-term rentals. And I have to say, when I campaigned, those were the top things residents talked to me about. And I campaigned all over the city because I helped out other wards. And so I heard about teardowns and remodels and short-term rentals. And, of course, I heard about taxes, people having too high of taxes and not being able to afford Prairie Village. But what the residents said is they always knew which houses were the short-term rentals because people were constantly coming and going at different times of the night. There was parking issues on the road, or sometimes even people just drove up and parked on the lawn. Garbage was set out the wrong days and would sit out. Extra dogs in the neighborhood, and sometimes without leashes because they didn't know our leash laws. And then, of course, the parties. Those were the things you heard about as well. So essentially, it was like a mini hotel operating right next to you across the street or in your neighborhood.
Did you consult with any other cities? I believe Leawood has done something similar. You can probably cite the other ones who have done something like this. Did you consult with any of them before you guys made your decision?
Yes. Actually, we've been looking at this for a year. We've discussed it in council for several months, and our staff and our legal did an excellent job of putting together a bunch of information for us of all the different cities. We were given the list of all the different cities and a detailed list of what they were doing for their city. So Leawood and Mission Hills were the ones I gravitated to. I thought they did a really good job. And just also listening to staff and the city administrator, they honestly didn't know how we would regulate this. I did a Coro report asking for how many long-term and short-term rentals, and I got back that they don't have the actual numbers. We have somewhere between 800 long-term rentals, but they don't separate the licenses, so they didn't know exactly how many were short-term and how many were long-term. The only way they knew we have about 30 is by looking up on the Airbnb website. So it's a really difficult idea to regulate, and so it looked like it would require more staff, which is more money, and then we're asking our taxpayers to pay for this on something they don't even really want.
So then how, Lori Sharp is here, Prairie Village City Council, they put not a ban on Airbnbs, but they put a limit, or I guess a minimum of 30 days on Airbnbs that starts next year, 2025, November. So it won't cost more money to make sure this is being done and regulated properly?
Well, we do have codes and we do have police that are already in place. And obviously, I think there will be a cost, at least initially, to implement the ban, but the cost would have been much greater if we put on specific regulations for short-term rentals and then had to follow up continuously to make sure they were complying.
Gotcha. So it's really going to come from neighbors informing the city? Is that the best way to explain this? Because you're not going to have cops going door to door on rentals.
Correct. And that is the issue. And I do find Prairie Village residents seem to be very patient people. And so that was the issue. We didn't have a lot of police reports because I think what happened and what I heard from residents is, there'd be a party going on or somebody be walking, letting a dog run around, and it was the short-term rental. And they wouldn't call the police because they'd say, oh, that person's going to be gone tomorrow anyways. What does it matter? So we didn't have a lot of reports, just oral reports when we'd walk in the neighborhood. And so in the future going forward, I really encourage the residents to reach out to the city so that the city can make sure these are actually following the rules.
Will that be through, 911 if it's extreme, but is there just going to be a line or something to call for that?
I don't know. I don't think that's been worked out yet, but there is a non-emergency police number.
Okay. So what do you say to other cities? I know that some have considered it. I know there have been conversations probably in most municipalities in Johnson County. What would you say to them as they consider this, but they also don't want to feel like they're overstepping property rights?
Well, again, as I said, the government is definitely in our tells us what to do with our property.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, it came down to my job. I feel as a city council member is for public safety and also to represent my residents. So I looked at the issues as far as, is this a public nuisance and safety? And from listening to the hundreds of residents, I decided it was. And for me, running for city council was all about listening and representing the residents. They need to be heard. And I had literally hundreds of residents email me, call me, text me, come to the meeting. And a huge majority, they just don't want this. They want neighborhoods filled with neighbors. And it's my duty to listen to the residents. And so I would challenge other city councils to do the same. Maybe their residents are okay with it. I don't know. But this is what our residents of Prairie Village said.
And are there, I assume there are several HOAs in Prairie Village, right?
Yes.
So could they have done their own rules around this? Or
a majority of the HOAs do not allow these.
Okay.
And to change an HOA, you almost have to have a unanimous vote for the HOA. It's very difficult. So predominantly the HOAs do not allow short-term rentals.
But it's hard if they don't have anything in their bylaws to implement this.
It's also hard because they don't have deep pockets.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And you're seeing it. And it's not just mom and pops with the Airbnbs, right? I mean, you've got LLCs all over the country buying up property in desirable parts of Johnson County and then flipping them to make some money on Airbnb.
That's absolutely true. When we first started getting letters from the owners, I would ask each one, I'd say, thank you for your email. Where do you live? And of the, let's say, 8 that I received, only 2 were Prairie Village residents.
Wow.
So you had outside residents, you had outside commercial property owners. I do have to say I did meet with a couple of the owners from Prairie Village. Wonderfully, well-spoken, kind, reasonable people. And, it's hard. These decisions are hard. But I had to go with, ultimately, again, the safety of the residents and listening to the majority of the residents. So that was why I made my decision.
Lori Sharp, and that was an overwhelming, 10-2 vote, right?
It was, yes.
Okay. So it wasn't like it was even all that close. 10-2, everyone was pretty much on board.
Right. But there still was a lot of gnashing of teeth and wringing of hands going on.
Yeah.
But it was 10-2.
As always. Lori Sharp on KCMO, Prairie Village City Council. That Airbnb 30-day limitation goes into effect next November after the vote this week. Lori, thank you so much for the time.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it.
913-408-7957. It's 8:45 on a Thursday. Pete Mundo on KCMO. 8:50 on a Thursday. Thanks for being here on KCMO 95.7 FM. Good conversation there with Lori Sharp, Prairie Village City Council person. And I know some of you want to hoot and holler on the text line, but she's right to note that the government tells you a lot of what you can and cannot do with your property, and zoning is one of the core parts of it, right? Because zoning gives you some kind of an idea of what you're purchasing when you buy a home. And if you buy a home in a place zoned R1, well, you don't expect a hotel to show up next door. That's not unreasonable. To be like, hey, I'm buying a home in an R1 neighborhood. I don't want, and I should not expect, a hotel to be across the street. Why is that such a big deal? Like, yeah, I'm a small C conservative, and I'm not a fan of government in most cases, but I also realize that, common sense is a thing, and there's big parts of our lives that are regulated on a daily basis. And while maybe we should want less of that, in small cases one of the biggest investments most of us make our home, why is this unreasonable? Sorry. There's a lot of ways you can go make a buck. I'm not sure why it's got to be a hotel in your home that you just want to turn into something because, you're in a place where you can make some money off it. Just do a long-term rental. No one's saying you can't rent the place.
Right. The key phrase I heard Lori say was, to her, she determined it to be a public nuisance based on people.
Yeah.
So I think that's the difference there, right?
That's a good guess.
What you do in your house, that's all right, you know,
Mm-hmm.
right? Mm-hmm. When you bring it out on the lawn, now I got to look at it. Jeez.
Yeah.
You know,
you don't want to do that to John.
Yeah,
Guy's home's
right.
immaculate. Come
Don't
on
make
now.
me come over there. Don't make me put my shoes on.
You don't want to do that. In the meantime, we obviously are heading down the home stretch of this national election. And what you are seeing last night, there was a moment for Kamala Harris that stood out to me above the rest. She did a town hall with CNN. And a lot of people today are going to play all the clips about the border and what she said about Trump and the word salads and things like that. But beyond all of that, something that stood out to me had nothing to do with policy. It was this clip of Kamala Harris, who was asked about a mistake. And here was her answer.
Is there something you can point to in your life, political life or in your life in the last 4 years, that you think is a mistake that you have learned from?
I mean, I've made many mistakes. And they range from, you know, if you've ever parented a child, you know you make lots of mistakes too. In my role as vice president, I mean, I've probably worked very hard at making sure that I am well versed on issues, and I think that is very important. It's a mistake not to be well versed on an issue and feel compelled to answer a question.
What the heck? What is no? What? Hey, go. Jeez, give me a mistake. Just be a real person for a minute, could you please?
That was the E.T. Answers, the 6:30 program that comes on, you know, the fluff deals that pop up where you say, oh, I'm a parent, I made mistakes.
Jeez, what is that? I'm going to read that. I mean, you know, if you've ever been a parent of a child, you know you make lots of mistakes too. In my role as vice president, I mean, I've probably worked very hard at making sure that I am well-versed on issues. What? My gosh, this is so bad and so unrelatable. Just be a real human being and be like, yes, I've screwed this up. And it would be nice if politicians did that more frequently. If you watch the VP debate, J.D. Vance actually was the first major politician I've seen in a while get up there and be like, yeah, I screwed this up. Or, yeah, I was wrong about fill in the blank. And it was very relatable. And it would be nice to have that back in our politics. But Kamala's answer is even worse than just saying no. It's like trying so hard to say something that means something, and it just means nothing. Like, we can all think of that moment, and she's maybe onto something there about parenting. Like, sure, we all screw up as parents. I screwed up last night. I got on both the older two when I've only should have gotten on one of the older two. But I put them in a bucket together, and I reprimanded them on something that was a mistake. And I sit here this morning, and I regret it. We all screw up as parents. Think about your professional screw-ups. You've had one, right? You have one, and you don't make it again. I remember being told, I guess it would have been 7 years ago now, 8 years ago. I got off the air at WFAN Radio, which is the top sports radio station, the original sports radio station in New York City, doing a show. And I was told by the program director, legendary guy, 30 years in the business, that I did the worst show in the station's history. And I will never forget it. And while I disagree with him on that, he had a point. It wasn't really how I presented the show. He wanted me to do more like X's and O's, like break down the sports. And I was doing more lifestyle sports than he wanted for that station. And he was right. The station was built on breaking down sports games. And I was kind of bored by that. So he was right, but I never forget it. We all have that thing. We all have that moment. And for Kamala to go down that road would be smart right now, because her big issue is that no one feels like they know her. She's not relatable. People don't know anything about her outside of her screaming, "Save democracy and Trump sucks." That's the entire campaign, and she can't get off of that, John, and it's embarrassing to watch.
Imagine if you had her mentality. Anderson Cooper's interviewing you for the show, for the job. Pete, what kind of show do you see there? Well, you know, I got you. Got to turn on the mic, right? I mean, I endeavor to get up early enough to make it in there on time, and keep up. So,
Yeah. It's like, thanks for pointing out the obvious.
That's the basics.
No S, Sherlock. Thanks so much. Really appreciate those insights. Couldn't have done it without you. That answer was the encapsulation of what appears to be, I'm not going to get ahead of myself here, but what appears to be a campaign that is flailing and failing in front of our eyes.